Today, I want to talk about two seemingly separate things that, of course, turn out to be the same, and to examine what their connection is and to see if there isn't an entirely new thrust. And it has to do with the purpose of the economy and where does the divisiveness come from? Because the title of this program is Divide and Conquer. And so
no more dividing.
No more dividing. Yeah, right. We're not before dividing. No more dividing conquer. So I'd like to start with, I've been writing some new music under the name Granny Rocks music, and I'm putting together an album of 8 songs, and I've got most of them kind of in the hopper in one form or another. And this one, I just got the mix last night, and it is so related to the whole issue about why we're divided. So, and it's very short. I've got a couple of pieces today, and they're all very short. So,
homeless people don't get cold. Not in their cardboard cities, clutching their possessions. Oh no. They're not like me. They're not like me. Now, wealthy people don't get scared. Oh no, not in their golden cities, clutching their possessions. Oh no. They're not like me. They're not like me. I'm old, that's what you see, but I'm still me. 30, 50, 70, I'm still me, that's what I see. Shut-in people, they don't get lonely, not in their walled-in cities, clutching to their memories. Oh no, they're not like me, they're not like me. They're not like me.
they're not like me. You know, Black people aren't like me. White people aren't like me. Muslims aren't like me. Christian fundamentalists aren't like me. The starving children of Venezuela don't feel pain like I do when I'm hungry. Executives aren't like me. Politicians aren't like me. Rich, poor, whoever, whenever it's convenient, they're not like me. This is honestly the way we think. It's the only way that we can deal with the pain that we see. I cannot imagine actually allowing myself to feel the amount of pain that is suffered by the animals, by the plant kingdom, by other human beings. It's overwhelming, isn't it? So this song speaks to that divisiveness in a very personal way, which I hope will reach across people's political beliefs and partisan ideology. You know, Republicans aren't like me. Democrats aren't like me. And so we want to see why we are so divided, why we are so cut off. What is wrong? What is fundamental? So I started thinking about the question, and you'll see how this all fits together, I hope. That song always makes me want to cry, by the way. What is the purpose of society, and what is the purpose of an economy? And it's really very simple. The purpose of the economy is to reproduce humanity. But that is not the way we have been trained to think. We are trained to think that the purpose of the economy is to generate money, not regenerate people. Now, what do I mean by that? Every society, whether you're looking at the baboons or the birds or the fish or humans or any nation, wherever you are, what our purpose is to reproduce. Now, there are two meanings to reproduction, and even though they are both reproduction, I'm going to call them different words just for clarity: reproduction and regeneration. So reproduction is, okay, we have children, which is the next generation, and regeneration is we have to survive also. You know, we can't even feed those children if we don't survive, you know, sufficiently in order to feed them. So it's just biology, right? With the whole purpose of all of life is to reproduce and keep itself going. Why? I don't know. You could ask God about that. I have nothing to say about that. So what we all really need to be doing is looking at how do we reproduce and regenerate. And that's what our economy is supposed to support. Now, let's take a very simple example of where this does not happen. Let's say you're General Motors and you have a car that explodes when somebody turns on the ignition. Now, that is not regenerative, is it? But what did the General Motors, and we all know that this happened, they looked at it and said, what would the cost be to us of replacing these, whatever it is, versus the cost of the suits for the deaths? Don't you think there's something odd about that thinking? Well, you know, on the one hand, it seems perfectly logical. Well, I mean, it's about the profit margin. You know, I mean, it's about profit. We have to survive as a corporation. But no, the economy isn't there for corporations to regenerate. The society is here, the economy is there for us to regenerate. And when I say us, of course, we have to include the planet, because we cannot reproduce without a planet. And so everything needs to be thriving in order for us to reproduce the next generation and in order for us to regenerate ourselves. Now, how did we get so far off? You know, whether it's in cave days where, you know, I imagine the guys are out there hunting and the women are having babies, right? It's still all about reproduction and regeneration, down to the wealthiest person on the block who wants their child to go to the best preschool and got into Harvard so they can reproduce themselves as a class. It's always about the same thing. Why don't we know this? Why don't we have conversations about this? In fact, let me share something that is such a perfect example of this. The Republican Party has just passed in the House an astounding health care bill called the American Health Care Act or something like that, which will deprive, if it were enacted, millions of people of health care, millions, and make it impossible for them to buy it, steal money from the poor and give it to the rich, and make healthcare less affordable for the sick who need it. I mean, okay, and all you hear about is the budget and the money, and I mean, and people, there are people who are talking about, wait a minute, there's a lot of people who are going to be hurt. I'm not saying that people aren't talking about that, but they aren't talking about the fact that we need healthcare to regenerate. We need healthcare to reproduce. They are going to make maternity care optional as a mandate for health insurance. Maternity care, I mean, it goes right down to reproduction. Are we insane? Is anybody saying, excuse me, I think there's a problem with this healthcare plan, which is humanity. We can't reproduce and regenerate with this healthcare plan. No, they'll say, well, the poor will suffer. It isn't that the poor will suffer. It's our society will degrade even further. Healthcare, universal healthcare, is not just a right, which is the way people talk about it. It's a necessity. You know, you have to be well in order to work. And why is this all so mixed up? And I'm going to tell you what I think is the reason that we are so messed up. Aside from the fact that everybody's into short-term thinking about themselves and their money and their income and and making money, not looking at the whole. But I think it comes down to housework. And the biggest division in, I believe, from my observation, and there'll be some cultural anthropologists who will stand up and say, you're wrong, Beth. Okay, fine, I'm wrong. I believe that the whole world, the whole society, forever, human society, and some other societies as well, has had one primary division, and it isn't between black and white, Christian and Jews. It's between male and female. That is what you see running through everything, right? Everywhere, everything you look at, every society you look at, almost all of them are not egalitarian. They may be egalitarian among the men or among the women, but when do you see, how rare is it to see an egalitarian society between men and women? Now, fascinating things happening today in our world, which is so many young people are rejecting the binary view of male-female. You know, it's like, you're either a male or a female. Well, now it's like, well, wait a minute, maybe I'm bisexual, or maybe I'm transsexual, or I don't know what I am, or
transgender.
Transgender, I mean. So there's a lot of mixing it up that's taking place. People are allowing themselves to get away from that very rigid way of thinking. But if we realize that that initial division has been tended to be in all kinds of societies between male and female, and it's usually the women that's on the bottom, if you haven't noticed, like in many traditional societies, it was okay to beat women. So, you know, while we're proclaiming how wonderful and devoted and spiritual these societies are, you know, what about the way they've treated their women? You know, sold the women, traded the women, enslaved the women. Something's wrong. So looking at that, you have to ask yourself why, and what is the implication for the whole history of humanity and the world based on that simple first primary seminal division between male and female? Well, it's understandable, right? Maybe you're in the cave and the woman is pregnant for the 100th time. And why is she pregnant for 100 times? Because babies die really fast. You know, there's a lot of death. So women are always getting pregnant. Plus, they don't have birth control. Nobody asked them if they really wanted all these children. But, you know, they don't even know why they're getting pregnant. Anyway, so here's the women who are weakened by pregnancy and the fact that women tend to be born with the breasts that produce the milk. And so here are the women, and the men are going out to hunt, to fish, to whatever it is, to conquer the world. Right? They're physically stronger and usually but not always, and they are not encumbered by being pregnant. So what did that give them? Superiority or power? Obviously power. Now, if the purpose of life in all societies is to reproduce, I mean, the microbes reproduce, right? You don't have to be a human being. If it's all about reproduction, why aren't the women being elevated? Like, whoa, look at that, man. I couldn't do that. I mean, the one thing that, there is nothing that a woman can't do that a man can if a woman is strong enough. I'm not saying, okay, maybe a woman can't lift 350 pounds, but she could lift 300 pounds. And of course that becomes, or 200 pounds or something, and that becomes less and less significant as we have automation and machinery and leverage and all of that kind of stuff. But as of this moment, men cannot have babies. So now you're looking at this and see, I've been a counselor for many years. And I know about envy. You know, if I can't do something and you can, it's the jolly green giant, you know. I feel bad about myself, therefore I must hate you. So anyway, so here's a wild thought. Supposing early in our collective history, men saw the women popping out babies and they said, I can't do that. How do you think they felt? Well, they had to put women down, didn't they? I mean, isn't it logical? If you can't do something, you have to put down somebody who can. And it's so fascinating that the essence of the survival of our species sits in the hands of the women that you beat, that you throw acid at, that you abuse, that you oppress. Isn't that interesting? Now, I'm not here as a feminist. I'm here as an objective observer of reality. Now, what is the result of this? Not just the suffering of women, but the division of society, where the men have got to keep proving that they're not women. I mean, what was the big insult that Arnold Schwarzenegger gave somebody? He was a girly man. Oh, right. Girly man. You know, it's like the worst insult is that you're a sissy or you're a pussy whip or whatever, right? So there is this rivalry with women, and there is this need to pretend that you are like 100% male, macho. I don't feel anything. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to compete. I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to play sports to the death, you know? Like, I'm going to have this sporting event where I kill myself to prove that I am not a girl. And so that is a terrible price that men have paid for putting down women. But from a social perspective, there is yet another price that all of society has paid. And by the way, we've all paid the price of men pretending that they don't feel. And I have asked, you know, at what point does that child, that boy, stop feeling? You know, he cries when he's an infant. Is there a difference between baby boys and baby girls' infancy about who cries more or less? You know, isn't it obvious that there's socialization that changes the way that men are relating to the world? And of course, that it's also putting women in a box. Like, if you don't reproduce babies, you are a threat to the whole fabric of society. And not only do you reproduce babies, but you have to reproduce regeneration, like you're supposed to cook and you're supposed to clean. All of this women's work is about reproduction, because remember, it's reproduction and regeneration. If the guy goes into the coal mine and he comes home at the end of the day wasted and coughing and sick, who is at home taking care of the children so he doesn't have to? And who's made dinner so he gets enough to eat? And who's washed his clothes so he can go back to work the next day? It's all part of one cycle, working together, men, women, all of us working together to reproduce the next generation and to regenerate ourselves. The guy who went out hunting was bringing home the food that the women ate as well, sometimes not the meat as much, not a good cut, the men had it first, like the alpha dog, right? But all of this together is about reproducing ourselves and regenerating for the next day. So when you think about the nature of what has been considered traditionally women's work, it has been around regenerating the men and the women and reproducing the next generation. So that has been our job, which is the essence of the purpose of the entire society. But men didn't see it. They didn't see their role. When they were in the cave, I would bet you anything that men didn't really get it, that they were also part of this miracle of birth. That nobody was thinking that together we are reproducing these children. It used to be so-and-so, Mary is pregnant. Now we're trying to break through that paradigm by saying Todd and Mary are pregnant. We're pregnant, right? But we're trying to break out of thousands of years of brainwashing, of seeing pregnancy as being something that happens to women, not something that happens to us, something that we do, our co-creation, which will reproduce our species. And that everything that we do, whether it's listening to music, feeding ourselves, clothing ourselves, making a nice home, going to the steel mill, directing traffic, being a social worker, all of these things regenerate and reproduce. That is what they do, but we don't see it. We have this division between paid work and unpaid work. And so I'm proposing the idea that the fact that we had this division between male and female, that men had more power, that they wanted to keep it that way because I'm not going to say they're stupid, but because they're short-sighted, right? Because there's something about power that corrupts. That because of that, everything that was associated with women and women's work has been denigrated. Whether it's nursing, teaching, look at the professions that women were allowed to do. Of course, poor working class women worked in tobacco factories, worked in the fields, worked right with the babies on their back, right? But in our sophisticated society, right, where more wealthy you were, the women were supposed to do the house and the men were, only supposed to do the rest of it. And all the work that was associated with women was poorly paid. Women were allowed to be teachers, but they were shitty wages. Nurses, and so on. Cleaning house, my God, one of the obvious, or having children and being on welfare, raising the next generation of children. Like, that's not well paid. Everything that's associated with women's work has been traditionally poorly paid because, it's not seen as work. But then going to the factory or sitting in the office writing out insurance policies or, running multi-billion corporations, that's not seen as housework. Yet they're all part and parcel of the exact same thing. The reason that we produce things is to reproduce ourselves. The reason that we cook and clean and have homes is in order to reproduce ourselves so we can go to work so that we can make the things that we need in order to reproduce ourselves. Am I being clear?
Yes.
Okay. So it is all one. There is no such thing as housework. There is no such thing as work. They are all the same. They're all part of what we need to do. Human activity geared to the reproduction of the next generation and the regeneration of ourselves. Now, this seems really obvious, doesn't it? And yet, I would guarantee you that 99% of human beings do not think this way. And what that leads to is an unbelievable amount of division in our society, because we can see, for example, not just the male-female division, but every other division that comes out of it would be thought of differently if we understood that what we're really talking about is reproduction and regeneration. That guy who bends over the vegetables in the fields is producing the food that goes into the stomach of my child. And yet we allowed that guy to bend over with a short-handled hoe and break his back instead of buying him a hoe that had a long enough handle for him not to break his back. Because I did not see that I am that he's just, as we've had a division of labor, we've gone from all of us are either having babies or hunting or fishing or whatever we're doing, or then growing food. We've had more and more division of labor. And as we've had more and more division of labor, we've gotten further and further away from the reality that we are all one and that we are all doing the exact same thing, which is reproducing ourselves. And the professor who sits in his ivory tower is no different from the mother who's reading to the child, is no different from the executive who's trying to make his company profitable, or shouldn't be. We don't see the oneness. We don't see the oneness of what we do. How many of us have felt that we should have some privilege because we earned more money than our partner? Or that a parent has a right to be abusive to a child because the parent makes the money? And there are so many divisions that are hogwash. They are like me. They are like me. They are me. We are all doing the same thing. How can we influence the international conversation with the recognition of the reality that everything is upside down? That we need to be looking at income inequality not just as a social justice issue, but as a reproduction, regeneration issue, that the poor people cannot be well, do not regenerate, cannot reproduce well children. The child who's got lead poisoning, the child who's malnourished, the child who's given no opportunities is not being raised to be the future generation of brilliant scientists, workers, housekeepers, toilet scrubbers. Everyone needs to be well to do their job in a well-functioning world. Those people overseas who have other kinds of resources, who are doing other kinds of labor, they need clean air and clean water too. It doesn't help us if they're dying. It doesn't help us if we're sick. They are expendable because we can always get other poor people to do it. But at some point, we will run out of poor people. Or those poor people will have diseases that reach us. Or they won't have enough money to buy our goods and services. I mean, from a practical perspective, it is so obvious that income inequality is insane. But it's more than that if we go to the heart of it. It's based on the misconception that the purpose of the economy is to make money. rather than to create and to co-create a society which not only reproduces itself, but we as humans like to think we can improve. Our relationship to the earth is the most blatant example of our stupidity, our collective stupidity. We cannot regenerate if our earth does not regenerate as well. And that's what we need to start talking about. And that's the level of change that we require in order to really change our world. It's not about reforming this or reforming that. It's about rethinking, reconfiguring, re-understanding, getting rid of the distinctions of power and coming together synergistically. Now, how can we do that?